Having thought about Jesus and his views about himself, the beginning of the historical theology of the Trinity, now we're going to think back to what happened, sort of history. Now, the first bit of church history we have the evidence of the Bible for. The book, the Acts of the Apostles, takes us beyond those events of Jesus' life, which you have in the Gospels, and tells us about what happened next. Well, it tells us a bit about what happened next. In particular, it tells us about the early days in Jerusalem, and then it follows Paul through to his imprisonment by the Romans in Rome. Jesus' resurrection, after 40 days, he leaves the scene. At some point during those 40 days, he teaches them. And at the end of the 40 days, he's not seen anymore. Luke in Acts implies that is when he ascends, although interestingly enough, in his gospel, he's implied that Jesus has ascended on the same day he rose. John also implies that the ascension happens at that point. See why we have this challenge with those who say that there can't be any disagreements within the Bible when Luke himself says something different. You might want to discuss that when we get back later. 10 days on Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes in a particular way on the disciples, and we usually see that as the birth of the church. These disciples go to their fellow Jews, tell them what Jesus has done. They have a hard time of it. All the hardships are from individuals or mobs, and yet the church begins to grow. In Acts, it's the Romans who are used to protect Paul from Jewish mobs. The first major issue which the young church had to face was that of race. Was the gospel only for Jews, or was it for others too? Remember, Peter wrestles that in the light of a vision and his experience with Cornelius, and concludes, I truly understand that God does not have favourites. That's Acts 10:34. The issue came to a head in what's known as the Council of Jerusalem. So now, look at Acts 15. And when we come together again, I'd like you to get into small groups. We'll see what we can do with Zoom on that. And ask yourselves the questions. What's the background to it? What is the outcome? What is the decree precisely that's given in Acts 15? How well is that decree kept today? And what does all that tell you about church history? So to remind you, what's the background? What's the outcome? What is the decree? How well do we keep that decree today? And what does this tell you about church history?